Normally, I wouldn't want to critique the man's work ethic around this time of year. I mean, a man of his age and his size, he's ramping up for the busiest time of year when he goes out on the evening of the 24th to deliver presents to all the... Oh no, this is George R.R. Martin, the laziest man in show business. Oh, interesting, reminding us all on a perpetual basis that the written word is definitely the domain of authors and not the spoken or in front of the camera, because every single time that this guy speaks on his own behalf or has somebody else speak for him, he comes out as just a detestable ass that will perpetually live in the shadow of J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh well. But hey, good news, everyone. Here's the thing. Like, for as much crap as I give the guy, you gotta kind of take it in stride, right? Like, if you got thin-skinned and you get offended by a random guy on the internet saying, "Oh, that George R.R. Martin, he sure is lazy. He sure is a passive-aggressive bitch. You should really grow up." You would think somebody that old and that sad would be able to just let go. But hey, to each their own, I suppose. Most of the stuff that I've seen from this fat ass, actually like quite a bit. The first half of Game of Thrones, the first 3 and few episode seasons, like those were good. Okay, the rest of the fanfic that Dumb and Dumber were writing, not exactly big fans of that stuff. But House of the Dragon season 1 and to the lesser extent season 2, that was pretty good. And in the new year, supposed to be getting a Dunk and Egg spin-off show. That's gonna be fantastic. And there's a bunch of other projects in development, and Aegon the Conqueror something or other, and some dumb feminist crap where he's apparently teaming up with Maisie Williams again, and Kit Harington doesn't know what's happening with the Jon Snow crap, which honestly the latter two I want nothing to do with. But if you're going to be telling older stories of Westeros and the Targaryen line, that could be fantastic, because yeah, of the stories that I know, and yeah, I've heard a bunch of synopsis, a bunch of theory crafting. It's one of my go-to genres on YouTube when I just want a long-form podcast to listen to. I'll listen to a bunch of different theory crafters that I know intrinsically hate my guts for the simple fact of the way that I vote every couple of years. It's fine. Separating art from the artist is, a right-wing individual. It comes with the territory. I like the guy, I like his work, and I like some of the people that opine on it. Yeah, if we can get an Aegon the Conqueror TV series, or if that's this Game of Thrones movie that's in the works, I think that would probably be the story that would end up fitting best in a 2.5 to 3 hour story, because the tale of Aegon the Conqueror, it would be well suited to a 2 or 3 at most. I would say, yeah, probably a 1 or 2 season series, or yeah, a 2.5, a 3 hour director's cut, 4 hour long film. That could be intensely good, especially if you cast Henry Cavill as Aegon the Conqueror. Oh, but a boy can dream. And then after that, you go ahead in the timeline a little bit. Like if you want to get real nasty, tell about the reign of Maegor the Cruel. That could be quite fanciful. But the Blackfire rebellions after you do House of the Dragon, that could be pretty sweet. Okay, what happened to Blackfire and the Sword, not the bastards of Aegon the Unworthy. And then, of course, have everything culminate in Robert's Rebellion. That would be the dopest shit imaginable. But at this point in time, I can speculate like how people speculate if the books are ever going to get finished. Spoilers for later in the video, but the HBO boss on working with George R.R. Martin. Marriages can be difficult. Yeah, because he's a passive-aggressive pre-diabetic, bro. Like, here's the thing. He was bending over backwards, praising the changes in Season 1 of House of the Dragon, only to go, you don't know about the ripples and the flaps of the wings of the butterfly when you're changing stuff, and then there's dragons, and I don't like some of the stuff. Oh, they wouldn't let me in the writer's room, but then at the same time I wouldn't turn up to the writer's room, and I've got so much on my plate. No, at the same time, I'm just so concerned about the rise of fascism in the United States of America. Oh, just shut up, doughboy. Get to work. Earlier this year, off-screen drama surrounding House of the Dragon Season 2 threatened to eclipse what had happened in Westeros. A Song of Ice and Fire creator George R.R. Martin, who notably kept quiet during Game of Thrones' controversial final seasons. Well, yeah, when Dumb and Dumber thought that they could, be off to bigger and better things by just hastily concluding the story that definitely needed another season or 2 for sure, and HBO was more than willing to give them however much money they want and however much time they needed, because even as awful as that show had become in the 6th, 7th, and 8th seasons, viewership was continuing to go up. So yeah, that's always going to bother me. Okay, so Dan and Dave didn't want to write it anymore. They wanted to move on to bigger and greener pastures. Okay, fine, fantastic. You want to go ahead and eat crayons in somebody else's backyard? Go for it. Why didn't you just hire somebody else? Why didn't you bring on some of the directors and some of the staff that you had that actually made some of the better episodes that Dan and Dave weren't really a part of? Like, you could have done that, but that's another what if for another time. Okay, though he soon deleted his post, this thing was felt all over HBO, and yes, House of the Dragon. Showrunner Ryan Condal, who is actually a genius, like the changes that he's making, case in point, King Viserys, okay, Paddy Constantine's performance, fantastic stuff. The extrapolation that he made on Daemon's stay in Harrenhal in season 2, some of the best content from that season. It's just, if he was a real showrunner, he would show Sarah Hess the door and kick that bitch to the fucking curb. Writer of the worst episodes of the series, bar none. Since Martin's biggest gripes revolved around the changes made to the story in season 2 that he thinks will be detrimental effect on characters down the road. Yeah, it's like, oh, Blood and Cheese got changed because baby Maelor, yeah, that's the name of the baby that never existed in the show, quite frankly ends up just cutting to the succession chase that is wrought throughout the entire show, but definitely plays to the green side of things and is, well, it's more direct and less ambiguous as to what's ultimately going to end up happening. So that change right there wasn't that bad. I could understand you having gripes and thinking, oh, it's a red flag of things to come. I understand. But here's the thing. Ryan's a guy who's trying to craft a story. He's trying to lead a production to an ultimate conclusion because, unlike you, George, he has a planned finish for his series. 4 seasons, that's it. But yes, Martin's biggest gripes, changes made season 2 that he thinks will have detrimental effects on characters down the road. Both HBO and Condal's responses to Martin's post emphasize the fact that adaptations can and will take necessary liberties with the source material. Yeah, either through financial restraints because Warner Brothers is a stupid company that is deeply in debt, didn't have the finances for the big battle that should have concluded season 2 that is going to end up getting pushed into season 3, which, if you know the Dance of the Dragon story that House of the Dragon is based on, oh boy, season 3 could either be big, bombastic, and flashy, or it's going to be another round of disappointments because you keep on pushing off a bunch of different huge battles that are eventually going to happen if you need to tell the story. So Warner Brothers better get your shit together before you conclude this story. Otherwise, it's going to be a big old disappointment and really leave a lingering taste on all of these A Song of Ice and Fire adaptations. But while Martin has since said he's done talking about House of the Dragon, even though he's an executive producer and he also has writing credits on the show, he's done talking about it though. Yeah, because that worked out so well for you the first time. But no, he's trying to distance himself from this project in the rare. And I have a lot of faith in Ryan Condal. He's done some great stuff before. With this series specifically. I don't know anything else that he's done before that. But I think he can land the plane, or the dragon in this case. So Fat Ass just wants all of the adulation if the series ends up going good, and then he can say, oh, well, see, I wrote that, and therefore those were my great ideas. Or if it ends up getting swallowed up like Arax at the end of season 1 as it peters out in season 4, then he can say, oh, see, that's what happened. I warned you guys back in the cut. Oh, the changes that were being made being detrimental to the overall story. Oh, just can it, tubby. Well, Martin, said that he's done talking about House of the Dragon, though. We'll see if he holds to that once season 3 rolls around. He is eagerly awaiting another Throne spin-off, A Knight to the Seven Kingdoms. Yes, that's the Duncan Egg. Little more grounded stories, which, that, if there's anything that's going to have a higher propensity for a quicker turnaround, it's definitely going to be that. And those are good stories, but it's also based on a book series that, guess what? Largely speaking, has an end. But that's another series that George has not finished. It's wild to think about. There's still 1 or 2 books to tell on that one because ultimately, being as vague as possible, we don't know specifically what happened at Summerhall. And potentially, that's what this show is going to do. Because, the House of the Dragon, Fire and Blood, doesn't really have a definitive ending. It just kind of meanders on into the next reign and what ends up happening in the aftermath of that. There's no real done, dusted, this is the end of this story before we hand off the reins to another story down the line. That's what we have with The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Generally, if you're aware of the story that it's going to be telling, you know some of the beats that are coming along because those stories have been out. Oh God, when did he start that line of books? Back in like the mid-90s or something like that. And he still hasn't finished that. Surprise! My favorite fact about A Song of Ice and Fire is that Daenerys has been in Marine since the Clinton administration. That's never not going to be hilarious. But you know where Dunk is, you know where Egg is, but it's just all of those little specifics. I guess George is leaving that up to the showrunners once again, but he's big excited for this one. Just just like he was back in early 2022 when he was big excited for House of the Dragon. We'll see how quickly he just acts like a cat in the next shiny thing that crosses his field of vision, which is very narrowing. You should probably cut back on the sweets, George. We want you to live to see all of your adaptations to be brought to screen and finished by much more capable hands. But he has several other projects at least being talked about. Okay, so a sentiment shared by HBO chief Casey Bloys, who was inevitably asked about the House of the Dragon dust-up at the recent HBO press conference. Deadline reported, "Martin is very important to me, to us, but we put shows together. It's like putting a marriage together. Marriages can be difficult, especially when Ryan Condal is making creative decisions and adapting work. It can be fraught. With any marriage can get rocky. I would prefer everybody just get along, of course, but when there's a creative process, we are always going to have bumps, so that's to be expected." Bloys also confirmed a Game of Thrones adjacent tidbit we already knew about. Kit Harington's Jon Snow spinoff is no longer on the table or on the wall because, does anybody, because that's one thing, right? Like, for as happy as people are basically with the source material, nobody's really pining for a sequel series to Game of Thrones. It's kind of crazy how that works. It was the biggest show ever, and then seemingly overnight, everybody stopped talking about it. Wild. But yes, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, one of the many confirmed projects, is set to come out, I've heard, early 2025, February, March, in the spring. That'd be dope. I'd definitely be down for that. Mostly because, like the source material, handled by capable and competent hands. And clearly, 13 years late, George R.R. Martin admits he may never finish Winds of Winter. We know that. We know that because what was the most recent update? Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to finish. He actually said the words. He did the thing. When George R.R. Martin is excited about an upcoming HBO Hedge Knights series after some sparring with the House of the Dragon showrunners last season, in a new interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he admits that things are kind of absurd with the release of his next book, The Winds of Winter, at this point. Yeah, exactly. Came out during season 1 of Game of Thrones, season 1, and still very little progress. When asked about the status of Winds of Winter, as he is in every interview, Martin had this to say: "Unfortunately, I'm 13 years late. Every time I say that, I'm like, how could I be 13 years late? I know how. You keep on attaching yourselves to different projects. You keep on giving yourself excuses so that you never have to disappoint people, like what happened with the conclusion of Game of Thrones." He is a coward. You'd finish the books if you were confident in your abilities, but you're not. You're clearly not. You made a world, you're telling a story that is far too big in scope, and also far too grand for your talents, because he's been an author for a very long time. This high fantasy stuff is relatively new to his repertoire, which is why if he's going to be finishing any of these ongoing series that he has, I would imagine the Dunk and Egg stuff could actually perceivably get wrapped up. Because you look at the release schedule of A Song of Ice and Fire, and yeah, they were coming out fairly regularly. And then it wasn't until Feast and Dance, that was supposed to be one book that ended up getting separated into two, that now we're in this big holding period. So yeah, we should have had Winds of Winter split up into 2 books. We might have one of the 2 out right now while he's just worrying about, oh God, how do I eventually shepherd this into A Dream of Spring, which is always going to remain a dream, unless of course he just hires a goddamn ghostwriter. He does like Robert Jordan does. Now obviously George, other than the fact that his physical appearance would lead you in the direction of thinking that he's dying a slow death, isn't somebody who is succumbing to a major terminal illness like Jordan was, so he sketched out the ending, he had a rough rubric for it, and then he had the very capable hands of Brandon Sanderson finish A Wheel of Time for him. George could do exactly the same. You want to go ahead and you want to work on your little TV projects, that's fantastic. You want to take a blank check from Sony and From Software to sketch out a rough idea of some lore for Elden Ring, you go for it, little Georgie. You want to play with your model toys and enjoy this outrageous success that you achieved much later in life, go ahead and do it. Just simply announce that you are not capable to do this. You continue to lie to us and saying it's still a priority. A lot of people are already writing obituaries for me. Well, you're the one who's talking about death on a consistent basis on your blog, fat ass. Oh, he may never be finished. Maybe they're right. I don't know. I'm alive now. I seem pretty vital, but you're not fucking writing. You owe something. By starting a series for the fans, for your audience, you make them a promise that you are going to take them on a journey. You're going to tell a tale that you may love, with characters that you may grow fond of. They might do some devious, dastardly things, but when it's all said and done, I have a vision. You're going to enjoy it, or at least I hope you do, and then both parties can come away satisfied. But a lot of people have been talking, okay, and especially the tales that George likes to write, they're awfully nihilistic. They're awfully subversive, and I hate how that's become a dirty word, because subversion, when done right and in the hands of an appropriate caretaker, can be used to elicit some very important and some very long-lasting story beats. But when it's all said and done, and now that this series is coming to its climax, or at least it has for the better part of 2 decades, some heroes are going to have to be made. Some heroic actions are going to have to be taken, unironically, unsubversively. Yeah, you can get there through very tragic means. It doesn't have to be, and everybody just linked arms and traveled up the King's Road together to rebuild the wall. The end. It doesn't have to be like that. You can have a bittersweet ending, and I would generally think you probably got a good idea of what you can expect for whoever ends up finishing this book series with season 8. It's just they're missing a bunch of different characters, and I can understand why George is a little bit skeptical whenever somebody messes with his master work. But if you're not going to finish it, somebody else will, and if it's not up to your satisfactory level, well, guess what? You said it right there. I'm alive now. I seem pretty vital. Then guess what? Finish the fucking book. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.